after some time, I ended up retiring a couple months later. And I was so lost because it's hard for athletes to understand while they're in it. But once you're out, there is so much of your life that has been completely dictated around this one thing. So when I retired, I realized that I lost an identity that had been so important to me for like 12 plus years.
What's up, good people? Welcome to season 3 of the Dear Young Athlete podcast, where we talk to coaches and athletes about their journeys and what advice they would have for a younger version of themselves. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson. I am a speaker, author, recording artist, content creator, rare disease advocate, and an aspiring Paralympian. If you want to hear my story, check out season 1, episode 1. But enough about me. Let's meet our guest. What's up, good people, and welcome to the Dear Young Athlete podcast, where we talk to athletes and coaches about their journeys and what advice they would have for a younger version of themselves. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, the man I get to speak with today. He is a former NFL player. That's right, he caught passes from the GOAT, Tom Brady. Beyond that, he is a speaker and the best-selling author of his book, Working Through the Dark, which I'm excited to hear about. And above all that, he's a person of faith, a man of God, and I cannot wait to hear his story. Without further ado, Asante Cleveland. Asante,
Jacob,
what's happening? How you feeling?
what's up, man? I'm good, man. Thank you for that warm intro. I appreciate it.
Hey, well, I'm sure there's a lot more I didn't say that we'll unpack as we go along. So, just for context, too, for the people, today is a special episode. Usually we're talking to coaches, but today we're talking to Asante, who uses his experience in sports and his platform to be an inspiration to others. And I thought when we met, I thought it would be a perfect fit for this podcast where we're all about sports and life and how it comes together to impact people. That being said, Asante, you will play in the NFL, okay? But I always like to ask the question, where did it all begin for you and your sports journey? How'd you fall in love with sports?
I first fell in love with sports when I was maybe 5 or 6. I wanted to fit in, and all my friends were playing soccer and t-ball, so I started playing soccer and t-ball. T-ball was a little boring, and I liked soccer, so I played that for a lot longer. Then in 5th grade was when I first started playing basketball, and basketball became my new love, obsession. I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I worked towards it. I started playing football in high school, but I wasn't all that into it. But when I got my first scholarship offer my junior year in football, but I put so much effort into basketball and was getting no real attention, I made the switch to think like, okay, if I'm going to go to college for free, it's going to be through football. So let me put all my focus and attention on becoming the best football player I could be.
Man, okay, so that must have been hard. So throughout that, you're tall, you're athletic. At what point did it kind of hit you like, oh, I'm really good at sports, and the fact that you didn't start football till high school, tell us about that. Like, how'd you get into football how'd you avoid it until high school? What was that like?
Well, like you mentioned, I was always taller than most kids. I never had a crazy growth spurt. I was always just kind of tall. So that made basketball seem like a natural fit. And I wanted to play football growing up. My older cousins, they all played football. They were all really good at football. My dad played in the NFL, but did not want me to play football or didn't let me play any of the Pop Warner stuff. I played flag football in middle school, but that's nothing really. But in high school, on the day of freshman orientation, because I had no intention of playing football in high school originally, the football coach walked up to me at the orientation and was like, "Hey, you are really big. You want to come out and play football this summer?" And I was like, "Okay." And that's how it started.
So were you good at football right away, or did that take some time?
I was pretty good. I started off as a wide receiver and I would make some nice plays. And then right before the season, I got moved to tight end. I saw it as a bit of a demotion. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't. I just kind of went with it. And I was pretty good at tight end. Then my sophomore year, I was pretty good. So I was making a lot of plays, but I didn't think anything of it because in my mind, I'm just a basketball player who was out here playing football. Because in high school, I was the only sophomore on the basketball team too, on the
Mm,
basketball varsity team.
hmm.
So in my mind, I'm still a basketball player. And then I was more impactful at football with less effort than I was at basketball.
Man, so you had to have enough self-awareness to say, man, if I'm gonna make it, even though I like basketball, I'm gonna have to invest in football. So how did you like, was it just the offer? Did you talk to coaches? Like how'd you come to that point?
It really hit me when I got the offer. Once I got a scholarship offer in a sport that I didn't give a lot of attention to, it really clicked. With, okay, I guess I am pretty good at this. I'm not just good for where I am. I guess I'm pretty good. So I then took the time to do some research and see where I was ranked nationally. And I started studying all of the top tight ends in the country to see what that even looks like because I had no real frame of reference. Then on that list, I think they had me at 63 in the country at tight end. And at 37 was a kid who I had gone to a camp with. And I knew I was better than him. So that's when I really start focusing on, all right, let me study like what it actually is to be a good tight end. I spent all summer going into my senior year working hard. Like before practice, we had a coach who he played in the NFL as well, and he would host a morning practice for anybody who wanted to come. Only maybe six of us ended up joining those sessions. I want to say all six of us ended up playing in college,
Mm.
but that work and then knowing like what it looked like after watching all their highlight tapes and seeing what colleges were actually looking for in a tight end helped me really figure out how I wanted to play the game. And by the end of my senior year, I went from number 63 in the country to number 15.
Mm. Wow. So, okay, a few questions. So, tell the people where you're from.
I'm from Sacramento, California.
Okay. Because you say like getting an offer kind of nonchalantly. Was that like kind of a norm at your school? Like, oh, people are getting offers, people are playing in college.
Not really. We had a couple people get offers from a D1 AA school like Cal Poly, And the year before me, our biggest recruit, he was a walk on at Harvard. So I was the first person in a while who was getting bigger time D1 offers. So the first offer I got was University of Nevada at Reno. And then I committed to going to Washington State before the season started. So in my mind, that's where I was going to go. I wanted to lock up the decision before my senior year so I didn't have to really think about it. And after I put out my senior highlight tape, I got a lot more interest. And University of Miami offered me, after they were already done with their recruiting process, they offered me in
Mm.
December.
Oh,
And I took a trip out there in January, like 2 weeks before signing day, and it was just a no-brainer. So I ended up going to University of Miami.
yeah. Okay, so I was like to know, oh, kind of what did it look like for you to go from 64th, not caring that much about football, to getting yourself much highly performing and recruiting? Like, what did you kind of start like a crazy work schedule, like work ethic, or do you feel like, because sometimes in high school people are just good and you don't actually have to work till college. What was that like for you?
Once I decided that I wanted to become a better football player, because I was good, but I didn't know what great looked like. So that's why I really sought out to see what was considered great. And those early morning workouts were a big part of just shifting the mindset to I am putting in work to get better at this. I am
Mm.
actively doing my best to become better at this one thing that I want to make my focus. So that was the big mental shift that helped me get there. And then the competitive fire that I had of seeing this dude ranked like 30 spots ahead of me that I knew I was better than.
So, did your dad come around to you playing football?
Yeah, he was really supportive once I was getting ready to go out for that first camp freshman year. He was helping me put on the pads because it was back in the days where you had to actually loop your pads in with the belt. And I didn't really know where the tailbone pad was supposed to go. I tried to put it in the front at first, but he was like, no, son, that's not where it goes. But he was really supportive, especially early on, because I was new to getting hit, getting tackled. That wasn't fun for me. And he really helped me shift my mindset. Like, hey, like you are going to have to either be the hammer or the nail. Which one do you want to be?
Mhm.
And so that mindset shift helped me.
Yeah. So, what made Miami a no-brainer for you?
At the time, Washington State was my best offer. They were 1-11 the year before, but they were a Pac-10 school, and that was really attractive to be a Pac-10 tight end. When Miami offered me, I didn't know much about college football because I didn't really watch football growing up. My dad didn't watch football too much, so I never really watched too much football. Around the same time University of Miami offered me, the U documentary, the 30 for 30, had come out.
Mhm.
So as I am entertaining this offer from them, I'm also learning a little more about the history. I didn't know the list of legendary players that had come out of University of Miami. And when I actually went to the campus, it was beautiful. It is a top 50 academic institution. So the school part was always going to be important for me, but also they were a powerhouse school and they played top tier competition. So I wanted to go out and compete with the best against the best, which I wouldn't have been able to do necessarily at Washington State.
Yeah. So, are are you tell us about the college career, because I know there was some. kind of ups and downs, and you can tell us kind of what that was like internally for you. And then also, are you even thinking about the NFL? Like, at what point do you go into college thinking about the NFL? Is it after a certain year? Kind of take us through that journey. Hey, 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 if you are enjoying this podcast, I need you to do two things. One, go on whatever platform that you're on and follow the podcast. Rate us and review us. This will help the algorithm and help this podcast reach more people. So thank you. Then I want you to head to 1020words.com/DYA. TEN20words.com/DYA. Check out our merchandise. We got hoodies, crew necks, sweatshorts, t-shirts, anything that you would want. Get some super comfy, stylish apparel and use code all caps DYA20 and take 20% off. Follow us on social media, Instagram at Dear Young Athlete, or on TikTok and Instagram. My account is at 1020words. If you're interested in being on the podcast or bringing Dear Young Athlete to your school, team, or group, simply head to the website and click the button that says Bring DYA to your team, school, or group, and send me an email, and I will look forward to connecting with you. Now, let's get back to the episode.
When I first got to college, the NFL wasn't on my mind at all. I just wanted to go out there and make plays and, see if I could actually compete at this level. And to my surprise, I was making plays pretty early in the training camp, in the practices. Then middle of the season, I got to start, and I was out there making plays, making an impact. And I still feel like at this point, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it well. And at the end of the season, I was named one of the top tight ends on the ACC freshman list of like all the positions. So I was the tight end that they named. And then I found out that like I was rated the fifth tight end in my draft class. And so now the NFL, which wasn't on my mind, is now like, oh, this could be a possibility. But then at the end of my freshman year, the coaches that recruited me were all fired, and I had to have shoulder surgery. So this new regime has come in. They're making their decisions and evaluations while I'm still on the mend, trying to get better, trying to get back on the field. And when I get back out there, I'm not getting the same amount of attention and adoration that I was the year before. I would make a play and it felt like it would go unnoticed, or it wasn't a big deal. Like they just didn't care. That really affected my mindset, my attitude, because at this point I'm a 19-year-old kid and I didn't know why I wasn't getting the same level of attention that I was just the year before. And then the middle of the season, like I'm not playing very much. And then I kind of put myself in the doghouse because I get caught falling asleep in a meeting and then go downstairs that practice and mess up like 3 plays in a row. And the very next morning, my tight end coach calls me into his office and tells me that I'm going to be put on the scout team, which means I'm not playing for the rest of the year. So in the span of a year, I went from one of the top players on the team with a lot of promise to I am now not even taking first team reps. I'm not playing in any of the games. So it was a really humbling experience. And now the NFL thing seemed like an impossibility.
And so Yeah, what is that like internally? Because it feels too like a chicken and an egg type situation. Like first you start not getting attention maybe that you should be getting or you had gotten, and then maybe your attitude and your mindset is kind of like, you know, sinking, and then the performance, and then getting put on scout team. Like it's kind of a spiral. Like where are you at internally with all that?
Well, internally, I was all messed up. I was so just hurt that these people didn't like me like the last people did. That's how I felt. And I was very lucky to have my dad to be able to talk to because his experience, he played college football. And when I first got benched, I called him and he gave me some sage advice. He said, Asante, right now you have your head in the mouth of a lion. Now, what's the first thing you do when you have your head in the mouth of a lion? Don't move. Do not draw unnecessary attention to yourself. Don't start acting out. And then once you have that down, the next thing you do is you have to pet the lion. You now have to play whatever game they're playing. There's no you wanted to show your individuality. It's like you have to go along with their program to be able to get an opportunity to get back on the field. And he also highlighted that I now had an opportunity because I wasn't on the first team offense. I wasn't taking those reps, but I was going against the first team defense every day. So I could make an impact by showing off my abilities against their best people. And so I then changed my mindset to every day on practice at scout team, I'm out there for blood. I'm out there to kick some butt.
Hmm. Man, I feel like athlete or not, that is so applicable. Like all of a sudden you're in a place you don't want to be, but what are you gonna do about it? Like, are you gonna are you gonna pout, which like is easier said than done, right? To like keep a good attitude, but you have that decision, right? Like, am I gonna be mad about this thing or am I gonna go out there and give my best no matter what? And that's not to say you never think about transferring or changing jobs or finding a better circumstance, but it's like, yeah, at that point, like, what are you gonna do? You have to show up every day, so you might as well give it your all. So, do you think about transferring? Is there, or like, do you get back on the field? Kind of where do you go from that place?
So the end of my sophomore year comes and I take that opportunity to just work out hard and so that I'm ready coming back in the spring so that they can see that I put in a lot of work. And I want to give them a better idea of who I am because at this point I'm feeling like they didn't get a great representation of who I am as a person and as an athlete. So that spring comes around and I do well. Going into my junior year, I get named the starter at the beginning of the year, but I still don't play that much, which is weird. And this is the point where transferring starts creeping in my mind. I am getting maybe 5 or 6 plays a game, not getting any balls thrown my way. And it's really frustrating. After I felt like I had put my best effort forward, but I decide against it when we get a new offensive coordinator and I get a new tight end coach. So I felt like I had almost a new lease on life. I knew 2 new people to evaluate me, and it paid off. Going into my senior year, I really liked the tight end. I liked my coaches before, but I felt like I had a better relationship with my new tight end coach, with the new awesome offensive coordinator, and going into the season, once again, I was named the starter, but my senior year, I actually started every game, and I shifted my focus to blocking. We already had a great receiving tight end, and I felt I would best be able to add value to the team and help myself out if I just become a much more physical blocker. Because every time we run the ball, I would have to be on the field. Every time we needed to throw the ball deep, I would have to be on the field. And that strategy paid off because I went from barely playing at all to being on the field every time we ran the ball, just about every time we were taking a deep play action shot. So that was a huge help, which kept me focused and wanting to stay.
Yeah. So that's awesome that you stuck with it. You did everything you could, and it ended up paying off. So backing up a little bit, freshman year, like all of a sudden you're playing football on TV for a Power Five school. Is it like people hitting you up all the time, like acting like they're cool with you, or do you feel like you're kind of famous at that point?
A little bit when I went back home on like a winter break, I would get a little bit of that mini celebrity status feeling when I would go back to my high school or something. But for the most part, it wasn't some overwhelming thing, especially in college. It wasn't that big of a deal on campus. So I was able to kind of keep my head level. Uh, I did start to feel myself a little bit when I was in the paper. So I was on this cover of the sports section for the Miami Herald. And that is around the time where I did start to feel myself a little bit. And I started to have an expectation around what I should be getting. And that then kind of bled over into that next year and that disconnect between me not getting what I thought I should be getting.
Mm, mm. Yeah, so you start feeling yourself and then you get humbled, and that's kind of how life goes, I feel like. So take us like kind of from that point. Um, what does it look like wrapping up senior year? How do you end up getting in the NFL? And just yeah, what was that like for you? Was it like dream come true? Was it what you thought it would feel like? Take us through it.
Yeah, senior year was great. We had a really good team. We got all the way up to being number 7 in the country. We lost to Florida State that year, who ended up being the national champions. But we had a really good year, and I think that success really helped my draft stock position. I played in an all-star game where I got another chance to show people what I could do. I had a touchdown in that game. So I was feeling pretty confident. I trained hard for my pro day because I didn't get invited to the combine. And I felt I did the best I could to give people a look of who I was. And I ended up going undrafted to the 49ers. And that was just a huge blessing. I was hoping that I would get drafted. Everybody wants their name called, but it didn't work out. But the good thing about going undrafted is you have an opportunity to choose which team you want to go to. So I
Mm.
got to choose between like Carolina. I originally picked to go to New England, but they had signed a tight end who I played with in my all-star game because his older brother was a tight end there years prior, and
Mm.
they're really big about keeping it all in family, which I respect. But I originally chose to go to New England. They didn't sign me, or they'd already chosen him. So I went to San Francisco. But New England ended up winning the Super Bowl that year.
Mm. Dang. So kind of give us the highlights of the your time in the NFL, and yeah, just some of the maybe ups and downs through that.
The NFL was eye-opening because very quickly I realized in practice that I was going up against people that had been in the NFL longer than I'd been playing football.
Mm.
And there is a real learning curve. I quickly found out that things that worked in college do not work in the NFL. So you learn to adapt and adjust as quick as you can. I was lucky to have great veteran tight ends around me, like Vernon Davis, Vance McDonald, Garrett Selleck, Derek Carrier. So I was grateful that I had people that were looking out for me and trying to help me get better. Going into like the preseason is when you really get an opportunity to show yourself. And in the last preseason game, I scored a touchdown. So I'm thinking, I made the team. I'm good. The next day, I ended up getting cut to be signed to the practice squad, which was still a great opportunity. And 20 minutes after I signed to the practice squad, I got called back to go to the facility, and I got cut from the practice squad because they saw someone that they liked a little better. And that was an eye-opener to see how quickly things can change in the NFL. So as I'm packing up to drive back to Sacramento, my agent calls me and says, "Hey, I've worked it out. You're back on the practice squad. Just go back to work tomorrow and don't hold a grudge." And just that whirlwind showed me, okay, this can be gone in a second.
Mm.
You have to do the best you can so that you didn't leave anything on the table, or you didn't give them more of a reason to let you go, and not to be complacent. So that became my mindset ever since then. So I was on the practice squad for a while. I would get active for a game and then get sent back to the practice squad if somebody got hurt. But by the end of that season, I was on the active roster. I was playing a good deal. I had started to get a feel for the NFL, and it was cool. And then the very next offseason, right after my first preseason game, I'm expecting to, run it back and possibly make the team this year. I get traded. Right after a preseason game, I got traded to the Patriots, which was a blessing to get to go where I wanted to go anyway. But it was just another reminder of how quickly things change here, how much is really out of my control. And the only thing that I really can control is my attitude and my effort.
Mm.
So that constantly got reinforced in my time in the NFL.
Wow. That seems like a cliche, right? Like you tell the middle school kids that, at football camp, but it's like that never changes. Like it's the same thing in the NFL. Like you might get traded here, cut there, but like you can control your attitude and effort. And it's just crazy how that may be an elementary lesson, but you never graduate out of that.
No.
So
Yeah, it's always going to be true. There's
yeah.
always going to be so much that's out of your control.
So kind of pick it up there. You're playing with the GOAT. Do you make the team practice squad? Like kind of give us the rest of the story.
So I started off on practice squad again, which was fine. I was just happy to be in the building in New England because I got to see how it looked when it was done right. I got to see what a well-run machine really looks like, and like undeniable. I was on practice squad for like the first 10 weeks, but I am like kicking butt on practice squad. So much so that they felt confident enough to trade the fourth tight end on active roster because they figured like, hey, if something happens, like you will be the next guy up. And then I get my first active game in Denver. Tom throws me a ball, so I get my first catch. And then the next week, I get my first start in Houston. and it's not at tight end, it's at fullback. But what helped me succeed a lot in the NFL was being really flexible and committing to learning all I could. I played very little just standard tight end, but I played a lot of fullback, which is a position I never played in college. I never played in high school, but that was an opportunity for me. So I always try to learn as much as I could, and I knew that that would make me more valuable.
Mm.
So I ended up playing a bunch of games there, and then on one warm Christmas, we are in like week 16, and a teammate is having a dinner for other players who don't have family in the area, so that we're together, maybe like 6 or 7 of us at his house. And as we are sitting at the table, just bless the food, I get a call from an unknown number. And when I answer it, it's Coach Belichick. And he's letting me know that they're going to move me from the active roster to the practice squad just for this game. But then I'll probably be re-signed for the last week. And on Monday, when I go to re-sign to the practice squad, before I got claimed off waivers to the San Diego Chargers. And the very next morning, in the middle of a snowstorm, I fly out to San Diego for the last week of the season. So I was then going from, at the time, the best team in the league to the Chargers, which were the worst team in the league. But once again, it was just that reminder that things change fast. So in 1 year, I was on 3 different teams. I moved across the country, back and forth, and not once did I get to choose any of those
Yeah.
decisions.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny because like every kid, you dream of being in the NFL, and it's like it's not to say like it wasn't awesome in a lot of ways, but like, do you dream of being moving across the country 3 times in a year, like going up and down practice squad? It's like there's a lot that people don't think about. People just see, right? Oh, you're on TV and must be nice having your life. And it's like, no, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, the NFL was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of stress
Yeah.
because there were so Mondays are the days where they normally make cuts. And when I was with the Chargers, I was on the active roster, but I was inactive for most of the games. So you only dress 48 people out of the 53 on the roster. So I was normally not dressed. So most Mondays I would be worried, like, am I going to get cut today? Because like I'm not playing. I'm on the like, am I going to get cut? So like, it was fun, it was exciting, but there was a lot of stress that came along with it and uncertainty.
Man, there's so many like life applications. I feel like you said, making yourself valuable, learning as much as possible. That got you on the field. And like, how true is that in life? Like, if you're going to fire somebody, you're not going to fire the guy that can do 3 jobs, right? Um, and then just living like, it's almost like you're living and playing with this realization and that this could end on Monday. And like, yeah, you might as well give it all you have, just knowing it's so temporary. But I just think like, what if we can live life that way, right? Like knowing like, I'm
Nothing's
not
promised.
promised. Right, exactly. Man, that's so good. So you're retired now. So
Mm-hmm.
you can tell us as much as you want about how that happened, but then also I'd like to get into kind of what it was like for you leaving the NFL and trying to figure out who you are.
So going into my fourth season, I was with the now LA Chargers since we had moved up from San Diego. And I was really confident going into that year. I had gotten stronger, I gotten faster. I felt like I had been in the NFL long enough to have some solid techniques and good awareness. So I'm going into the season like pretty confident, like, okay, I'm going to make this team. And if not, I'm going to be playing somewhere this year. And on the third day of training camp, I end up tearing my meniscus. And I spend the year on the injured reserve. And once again, I'm focused. I get stronger. I get as strong as I've ever been. My goal was to come back and be the best blocking tight end in the league. And that first day of free agency, I fly out to New England to go re-sign with them. And then their doctors don't clear me because they say my knee is still torn. So after some time, I ended up retiring a couple months later. And I was so lost because it's hard for athletes to understand while they're in it. But once you're out, there is so much of your life that has been completely dictated around this one thing. So when I retired, I realized that I had lost an identity that had been so important to me for like 12 plus years. I lost a lot of my community. I was used to being around like 100 people every day in a facility, and now I was just at home at an apartment, not doing anything. And then I lost a lot of structure. I now had all the free time in the world and no idea how to fill it because for the better part of my life, I had been told what to do, where to be, what to wear. My whole year was dictated around football. And so I didn't know what to do. So it was a real struggle. I went through a big depression, which a lot of players do once they're out of the league. It was a struggle trying to find myself. I spent a lot of time almost putting it in the hands of people who I deemed smarter than me to help me figure out who I was and try to like do whatever they're doing, and then realizing that, oh, this isn't for me. But it took me a while to take the time and just figure out what I wanted and what was best for me. But that self-discovery part of it was hard, but so necessary to help me get to where I am now.
Mm. And I wanted to ask you about your book, and I'm assuming that is a lot about what the book is about. But if there's more you want to share too, kind of about um when you wrote the book and kind of why you wrote this book, um yeah, tell us about that. Hey, are you a high school or college athlete looking to use social media to share your faith in Christ? If so, I would love to personally connect with you and tell you about our brand ambassador program, where we can get you hooked up with some of our merchandise to rep on your social media platforms, and we can get you hooked up with a coupon code for your audience where you earn commission on any sales that come from your platform. Head to our website and click the button that says Become a Brand Ambassador. I look forward to connecting with you, and let's spread the good news together and do it in style.
I started working on the book after one of the best things I started doing after football was going to therapy because I had some stuff I needed to talk about. And I had been holding it in for so long that I started to see how it was manifesting in other areas of my life and how the depression was a little heavier than it felt like it was more than just I miss football. It felt like it was a little deeper than that. And I had dealt with some child abuse growing up. And because I always had sports as a distraction, I never really had to think about it. But once I wasn't playing football anymore, it was top of mind pretty often. So I started writing just a personal essay about the story, about what happened, just as a way to get it off my chest and to observe it on paper. Then 2020 rolls around and we have the lockdowns. I was lucky because I had already kind of experienced a lockdown once I retired. Like I wasn't going anywhere, I wasn't doing anything. So I'd already had that time to reflect. And then when 2020 came around, I saw how many people were experiencing this for the first time. And also, I was realizing that there are a lot of kids who were in a similar situation as me who are now trapped. They don't have the outlet of sports anymore. They can't go to school with their friends. They are now trapped in this potentially volatile situation for an undetermined amount of time. And the people that are taking care of them are increasingly more stressed. The accounts of domestic abuse and domestic violence went up significantly during the pandemic. And so I just wanted to share my story and what I went through to say that no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you're going through, you can still overcome anything and achieve whatever you want. You can achieve any goal, any dream. And then for the people that were now sitting with themselves and possibly reliving these painful pasts that they had that they may not have addressed, I wanted to share like what I did to kind of work through that.
Hmm. Man, I think what's inspiring to me is I think life gives people a chance to face themselves and face their past, but it's up to you if you take that chance or not. And for you, it was such like you have football to distract yourself with, right? But then now you didn't, and you actually kind of faced yourself and your past. And like you said, it was like now you don't have football to distract. I think what some people do is they just go through their whole life finding new distractions and never dealing with their internal self. And so I think that's inspiring and that's really good for people to hear and how cool to kind of write it in a book in a way that you can give it to the world. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways that people may try to distract or numb themselves to whatever happened in the past. But the longer you do that, the more you're just carrying a weight that it's always going to be there no matter what you do. But it is heavier for you than it should be. But when you take time to look at it and work with it, like you just get stronger and the weight's still there, but it's lighter to you. It's not as daunting of a task to look back at or try to bring it up. It just is what it is. Like maybe 5 years ago, it would be really hard for me to share that I'd gone through child abuse. But as I've worked through it, it is not that difficult to say. It still happened, but it's not as heavy for me.
Yes, it's not like you forgot what happened to you or that what happened to you wasn't, really a horrible thing, but it's like I sort of feel like that's the only way to make peace with something bad happening to you is finding out how that thing can be used for good. Um, which again, like that could sound cliche, but it's like what it's almost like one of two options, right? Either something can eat you alive and destroy your life from the inside out, or you can figure out how can how can I flip this thing um and use it for the good of the world. So that's awesome. I want to ask you um just about where your faith fits into all this and sort of the faith journey that you've been on, what that looks like, what kind of big moments have been a part of that, and how are you seeing your faith impacting you and being lived out?
Growing up, I was in the church all the time. And ironically, it was through the person where I was like receiving a lot of the abuse from. We were in the church at least 3 to 4 times a week.
Mm,
So I had a solid foundation in my relationship with God. But then I stopped living with her when I was 11, and I lived with my dad full time. And while my dad was a very wise and spiritual person, we didn't go to church, and he didn't read the Bible or anything like that. So that kind of got away from just being connected through the Bible or going to church. And wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago where I just started praying again. And it was at a time when I was really struggling, and I had exhausted all the options that I had thought of. And it was almost like, man, I might as well just start. I might as well seek a higher power at this point. And so I started praying again. And then last year, I started going back to church. And what I realized was, though I wasn't actively pursuing a relationship with God during that span, God had always been by my side. I can look back on different times where I had an unreasonable amount of faith that something was going to work out. And it was just because the Spirit of God that it
mm,
happened.
mm. Man, I feel like probably unfortunately a lot of people likely have stories where abuse and church are intertwined, and that is just tragic. And I love the fact that it's like we need to find a way to realize sometimes that the mistakes that people make aren't a reflection necessarily of God, and to be able to kind of separate that and not give up on who God is just because people misrepresented him. I think that takes a lot of strength, and I just think it's easier to be like, oh, well, God can't be real because I went through this, and then kind of live your whole life separated from God and his purpose for you. So I want to applaud um I want to applaud taking that step.
Yeah, I appreciate it. For a long time, I felt like that the people in church were hypocrites because I had experienced people saying one thing about how you should live, but getting treated a completely different way. I knew other people in the church that were experiencing different kind of traumas and stuff like that. So I felt like a lot of the people there were hypocrites. But God used what I went through to help other people. And that's just the power of the Spirit. And now using my experience to try to help other people is, I think, what God uses us all for. Like, we are best suited to help people who are going through the same struggles we've experienced.
Mm. Amen. Amen. Um, yeah. Well, I want to leave space before I ask my next question if there's anything else you want to add about kind of the way that your faith is been impacting you.
It has, I'm getting reacclimated, is how I feel right now. I, my intention going into this year was to reestablish and strengthen my relationship with God. So just getting in the word every day. I have the Bible app. So my goal is just like keep that streak alive of the verse of the day. So that is how I'm doing it, and just trying to just reconnect and get deeper and deeper in the word, and just getting a better understanding of what God wants me to do and how I can best live out my purpose.
Yeah. Something I love about sports is like you don't become great overnight or in a year even like it's dedicated action over a long period of time where you see fruit and success of your labor. And I think that's just what's cool about our faith is like, yeah, it's not so much about, oh, overnight, now I know the whole Bible and I'm living perfectly, but it's like if we can keep keep taking small steps in the right direction, um, you'd be surprised where you end up, right? Whether it
Yeah.
be, yeah, you start lifting weights, you're surprised where you end up in 2 years, right? So yeah, that's great. And so, and speaking of that, I think it's a good transition. We always ask on the podcast, there are so many life lessons wrapped up in sports, right? And we could talk all day about them. But if you have one that you feel like this is your favorite one, this is a lesson from sports that you've really seen true in your life, what would that be?
I would just say, dear young athlete, always do your best. You're not going to be great immediately. You're going to make mistakes. But the only thing that you should be concerned about is doing the best that you can in any given situation. If you can say that you gave it your best effort, then that's a win. That's something that you should keep your head held high about no matter what the outcome was. Because over time, your best will continue to get better and better and better. But it only happens if you always do your best.
Hmm. I love that because coming from someone who played in the NFL, right? So many young people are out there with that dream, right? And it's like just keep doing your best if you want to get there, but then you also are you have a perspective of like you achieved that dream, you played in the NFL, then you got back into real regular life and you had to figure that out. And it's the same answer uh,
Mm-hmm.
for both. And I love that. I believe that, man, if anyone is still listening, your story and this advice is really going to impact them. So I just want to say thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing with us, being vulnerable. I really believe this episode. I know it's been a blessing for me, and I'm hoping whoever listens, it will be a blessing for them. Thank you. Any final
Thanks for having me.
word? Yeah, any last words for the people?
No, just hey, keep your head held high, stay prayed up, and things will work out.
All right, all right. Well, that's a wrap. We'll see you in the next episode. And there you have it. One more episode in the books of the Dear Young Athlete podcast. Thank you for listening. Again, check out our website, our social media, rate and review us. Make sure you're following because we have some great episodes coming up that you won't want to miss. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.